All right, so I guess I'll begin. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, of glories to Srila Prabhupada. During our last session, we ended, and I said that we should probably have another session so that I can answer the questions which were submitted originally to me, which I didn't really address in the last session. So essentially that's what we're going to be doing partly in this session. Is I'm going to be taking the questions which were already sent to me, and I believe also I would be able to leave some time in case some devotees would like to ask questions online. We can do that. But otherwise, I have no presentation I'm going to be making today. It will just be questions that you've given to me and some answers to them. That's my short introduction. Chutapriya, that's okay? Give me a thumbs up if it's all right. Yes? Okay. All right. Now, the questions that were submitted were based on the request that I had made for you to read the transcription of a short talk that I gave 2 years ago about care, not control. And I'm assuming that most of you have either read it or heard it. And these questions that I've received were based on that talk. So, first question. What is the qualification to detect devotion in other words? Excuse me. What is the qualification to detect devotion in others? In other words, are there any external indications that allow us to see devotion in others? What should one do if he does not have such qualification and vision? Can such a person take care of others? There are several questions there. So I will take one at a time. First question is, what is the qualification to detect devotion in others? Now, this question could be taken from two different angles of vision. One angle is, well, as I spoke about citing Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur from Chaitanya Shikshamrita, that the highest respect is given to devotion. So, if we're not capable of seeing devotion, then it almost seems we're not capable of really giving that kind of respect to anyone. So, taking that into account, I'm going to speak about that, not very long, but just speak about that. And that is, it's not so easy to be able to characterize anybody for who has devotion, who doesn't have devotion, especially when we don't have devotion. Because unless the heart is clean, we may have the tendency to project on others something that doesn't exist. In fact, one of the characteristics of ignorance is to see devotion where it doesn't exist. That's given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Madhurya Kandambani. So it's not such an easy thing to label somebody that has devotion and somebody doesn't have devotion. But taken very simply, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Satatam kirtayanto mam, yatantascha dridapita. He says what devotion is. Somebody who's always chanting my glories. Somebody who's always endeavoring with determination. Somebody who's bows down before the Lord, offering obeisances to the Lord and to one's superiors who are representatives of the Lord. He says, such persons perpetually worship me in devotion. So these are simple characteristics that we should try to see in others, that they speak about Krishna, they speak about devotional service, they don't engage in idle talk about mundane topics. They're endeavoring with great determination. What is their endeavors directed towards? Ultimately, as Krishna says, endeavoring means in service to me, or endeavoring in service to superior Vaishnavas. But constant endeavor is another symptom. And offering obeisances and taking the humble position, offering proper worship. Krishna describes this as a characteristic of somebody who is worshiping in devotion. If we want to get into a lot of details about the symptoms of bhava bhakti, I'm not going to go there today. It's really not the essence of what we're really addressing here. We're just looking for certain signs that other persons are worthy to be glorified and served because they have devotion. And we should always try to see that in others. And to the degree they manifest it in a way that convinces us, then we offer our respect to that devotion. So that's one side of seeing devotion. What is the qualification? Qualification is ourselves not trying to avoid devotion. That's our qualification. Not trying to avoid ourselves in either seeing it, recognizing it, and practicing ourselves in whatever way we can, because, as Srila Prabhupada said, the beginning of devotion is strict adherence to the instructions that one receives from the Vaishnavas. He said, that's the beginning of love. Love begins at that point with obedience. You can't go past that and expect to come to devotion without first obedience. So that is also a good indication that somebody is an obedient servant and is obedient to the higher order. So these are things that we can look for. Now, the other way of looking at this question, what is the qualification to detect devotion in others, should be, okay, how do I see the potential for devotion in others? This is a more important point. How do I see others have a potential for devotional service? Because as a preacher, I'm supposed to be seeing that everyone has a potential to engage in devotional service, but now how to tell if the potential is there? How to really tell? How do we know the person has no potential for devotional service? He's listed in the category of a person who has no qualification for bhakti. He's actually an atheist, should be neglected. So, how to see the potential for devotion? This is much more important than seeing devotion. And the best way to see potential for devotion is actually given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Chaitanya Shikshamrita. He even explains that a person who is not even on the platform of a Majjhima Bhakta, he's still engaged in sadhana bhakti. He teaches others, both with good instruction and by his example. And if the person he teaches by good instruction and by his example doesn't show a propensity for avoiding those instructions and the example, then that person has potential for devotion. But we won't know unless we teach devotion. And how can we teach devotion unless we practice it ourselves? So that's the best way to know. If somebody says, look, I'm not interested, this is too high for me, I'm looking for something else, he's always finding faults, and although you're trying to be a good example, you're trying to deliver good instruction by your preaching and by your example, then you may at some point draw a conclusion that there's limited potential for devotion in this individual, and it could be as a result of no qualification from previous contact with devotional service or even in a previous life. So you won't know about anybody's potential for devotion unless you preach it and try to exemplify it. Just like, a simple example. Sometimes devotees here, we're not supposed to preach to the atheists or to those who are envious. And devotees sometimes they get bewildered by this question, but we go out in Harinam and meet so many people, and how do we know who's an atheist and who's somebody who should be avoided? Well, the only way you can know is by going out in Harinam, distributing the holy name of the Lord. And when you see people who are really antagonistic, really don't want to hear, really offensive, then you know this is somebody I need to avoid. But if you don't go out in Harinam and you don't preach, how are you going to know? You won't know. Of course, that could be questionable too. But so I hope that answers that question. That more important than seeing devotion is to see the potential for devotion. And the only way to see the potential for devotion is by being a good example oneself. I think of the early days. I joined even after, the real early days. But it was still the early days. And I can't say that the majority of the devotees could see the potential for devotion in others. But Prabhupada certainly empowered and gave us the impetus the desire, and even the purity to help others, even though we weren't on a very advanced platform of devotional service. Why? Because we had faith in that example. In fact, I'm currently reading Giriraj Maharaj's book, I'll Build You a Temple, which was just published very recently. And I just got it. I've only read 300 pages so far. It's about 600-700 pages book. But still, there's just so many wonderful stories of how the devotees were given orders which unimaginable to preach. Unimaginable. And circumstances which were also very, very difficult. And yet, they did, and they got results. And why did they get results? Because Prabhupada was right there behind them, giving them strength, giving them faith, giving them the example by his teaching. And it all went on from that platform. And all these stories are fresh in my mind. I'm not going to go into them because I want to answer more questions. But my point is, when there is an example of devotion, and when somebody's speaking it, about it, then it gives you the opportunity to help others, to see who else has the potential for it. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur specifically states, even for those who are not on the platform of Majjhima Bhakta, still, by their teaching and by their example, they can bring somebody who has a potential for bhakti to a platform of, or to advance in the path of bhakti. So we don't have to be Uttama Bhaktas. We don't have to be Majjhima Bhaktas. What we do have to have is faith. That has to be there. And to the degree we have faith, to that degree we'll show it and be able to instill it in others by our words and by our example. People see you have faith, it's infectious. People see the difficulties, obstacles, trials that you have to undergo, and still you remain determined, instills faith. It's just natural. So this is how we can recognize the potential for devotion of this. And incidentally, the question was also asked, what should one do if he does not have such qualification and vision? Can such person take care of others? I tried to answer that question. Yes, you can. If you have faith, and you represent that faith by your teachings and by your example, you can certainly take care of others. Now, one other thing I wanted to say to answer this question. I always do this. I end up spending more time on one question and not getting to the others. Forgive me. But I'm reflecting, when I read this question, I was reflecting even on my own service that I had both in the 1970s, the early 1980s, and I was responsible for, they called it devotee making. I don't make devotees. I didn't make devotees. Krishna makes devotees. But I had this responsibility and it was in New York City, and many people were coming, and I found the most effective way for inspiring people to come to Krishna consciousness was, more than being an authority to them, was being a friend to them. Sometimes we're afraid to be friends. We think, how will I ever get respect if they only see me as a friend? I'm supposed to make friends with people on the same level as me, and I'm supposed to preach to those who are not as advanced as I am, and I have to hold the status of being the more advanced one in this assembly. And I don't want to run the risk of being seen as a friend. I'm a superior, and I should be seen that way. But I found it there. I found it as a traveling preacher. I was doing cooking classes. I was teaching people how to make chapatis, samosas, halava, and they knew nothing about Krishna consciousness. Nothing. I wasn't an authority about them. The only authority I had was I knew how to make halava, chapatis, and samosas, and they didn't. That maybe was my authority. And then I was with them and became friends with them. And when people see certain qualities that they begin to respect, then the relationship naturally changes. You don't have to force it to change. It naturally changes. And I found that it's very effective in the beginning, that we shouldn't try to always be above everyone that we're supposed to be preaching to. And if we try to be above them, they're going to see it. And they're going to see through it. And they're going to look for all the bad examples that they shouldn't be seeing, but they want to see because you're putting yourself above them. So therefore you have to hide them and hope that they won't see the bad examples, and be careful to make sure that nobody else reveals the bad examples, and to stifle them, suffocate them so they don't reveal the bad example, because if they reveal the bad example, then how will I get the respect that I need to be superior than they are, which they're supposed to see me? Put that aside. Just put it aside. And be friends with them. And care for them. That's why that is care, not control. Care for them. You want to see them become Krishna conscious. Why? Because you know how nice Krishna consciousness is. And you're experiencing it. So that's a platform to start. And then that was my experience. I'm just telling you that was my experience. That's what I did. I was friends with so many people. It just so happened I had a shaved head, I wore a dhoti, and I chanted Hare Krishna, and then gradually people began asking questions, and a natural relationship began to evolve, which I didn't have to really enforce with them. Somehow, I was a brahmachari. I wasn't a sannyasi. I was a brahmachari. But somehow, some respect was there without even having to ask it. And then you just have to continue the relationship once the respect is there by being an example which is worthy of respect. It will just continue naturally if you're an example which is worthy of respect. And then you can preach. And then I wanted to add that part. It's just based on my own experience that I had. How was it? How many years ago? Anyways, a long time ago. It was over 40 years ago. So that might also address some of the other questions that are here. I'm not just answering one question. I've actually answered other questions that I got altogether. Another question. Chutapriya, I'm not going too fast? Okay, thank you. What should be the ideal culture of cooperation between managers and counselors in caring of devotees in such unequal positions? Ideally, the counselor, having become qualified, can control his counselee, his or her counselee. And he or she has a better chance to remain a good person in perception of a devotee. Well, this is confusing. Chutapriya, I don't know, somehow, can you follow it so far? You can, okay. The counselor has a better chance to remain a good person in the perception of a counselee than a manager has. Why? Because the manager has to correct, directly refuse, and even force people sometimes for the general benefit and common goals. Unfortunately, some devotees prefer just to take the part of a protector and the wise person, and to support dissatisfaction with the management, and taking that as care, thus destroying faith of the devotees in the institution or authorities. Interesting question. Yes. Therefore, the question is, what should be the ideal culture of cooperation between the managers and the counselors in caring for devotees? Ideal culture can be answered with one word. Maybe some of you might be aware of what that one word is. I speak about it a lot. In case those who are wondering, it's respect. That's the ideal culture. There should be a culture of respect. And if there's a culture of respect, especially for a person who has a position of authority, we've talked about it. In fact, it's even in the talk of care, not control, of the different levels of respect First is the respect towards all human beings. Then the next is a respect towards persons who have a position, authority, and we even gave the example, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya gave respect to Shankazi because of his position. And this was even demonstrated by Lord Chaitanya. So, to simply take the position that, yeah, the managers are wrong and I'm your real protector, is definitely not a very cooperative spirit. And it should be mutually shared also that the manager should respect that the devotees who are taking care of the devotees may potentially see something that's destroying the faith of that devotee that may help them to manage. This should be done in the background. It shouldn't be done with the people to whom we are taking care of. That's not caring for them. It's to turn them against Srila Prabhupada's system of management. How's that care? That's not care, to turn them against. And neither is it caring for them as managers if we're not willing to hear and to respect somebody who's trying to navigate through a neophyte devotee's progress in Krishna consciousness and who sees something that could potentially destroy his faith if it could be easily corrected. Easily. Sometimes it can't be. But there has to be mutual respect between the managers and the devotees who are caring for others. And if that mutual respect does not exist, then it's going to have a negative impact on the devotees we're supposed to be taking care of. Because then they'll see, look, even these people can't cooperate. One of the things they're supposed to be seeing in Krishna consciousness is a level of cooperation and respect and affection, priti. And if they don't see dadati pratigrinati guyam akyati prichati, if they don't see priti, if they don't see affection, even between those who are responsible for them, they're going to wonder, what is this? So, respect. And if we can't find enough within our heart to learn how to respect, maybe we're not the right person for that service. That's possible. Because it's just a number one qualification given by Lord Chaitanya himself, repeated by him himself, in so many words and in so many places, to be able to offer respect to others. And as we've many times said, respect doesn't mean total submission. Sometimes devotees think that to respect somebody, it means I'm supposed to be totally submissive to them. No, I respect that they have a position. I respect that they have some devotion. I respect that they're sincere and they're trying to serve. And I respect their service. That's what Prabhupada talks about in Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, about the Vaikuntha mentality that everybody respects the service of others. Everybody always wants to see others engaged in service. And nobody thinks his service is better than other service. This is Vaikuntha mentality. And for those who may be interested in hearing such a detailed description of Vaikuntha mentality, then it's very vividly described in the pages of Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So that's my answer to that question. It could be taken further. Maybe we may see that somebody on either side is doing something that needs attention. But still, it should not be done at the expense of the faith of new devotees. It should be done in a mature way between senior devotees, and not at the expense of the faith of immature devotees. In fact, when I was the Bhakta leader in New York City Temple, there were, at the time, it was 1977, maybe 78, and there were more than 220 devotees living in the temple. It was a big skyscraper building we had in Manhattan, 11-story building. And I was responsible for all the new people who either walked into the door for the first time or wanted to come and join the Bhakti program and to be trained. There was an understanding that existed between every single authority in the temple that nobody was to instruct the new person unless I didn't make the policy. I didn't make it. It was made by the temple president. But nobody was to instruct the new person unless it was discussed with me first. Why? Because when you have 220 people in a temple and a new person walks in, immediately as soon as that person walks in, he has 220 authorities telling him, don't do this, don't do that, you shouldn't do this, you can't do that, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't bring this, shouldn't. It was just how it was in late 1970s. Why? Because it was destructive to the faith of the individual. So we should try to protect the faith, because faith is something that's very weak in neophyte devotees. We oftentimes give the example, quoting Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that when faith or Shraddha takes birth in the heart of a living entity, it's like the birth of a newborn baby. And when a baby is just newborn, the mother is always very careful to protect the baby from heat and cold, hunger and thirst, and from all kinds of bad elements. And the mother not only protects the baby, but gives nourishment to the baby, so the baby can gain sufficient strength to deal with the harsh elements, in time becoming strong enough to deal with the harsh elements. And he explains that when faith takes its birth in the heart of a living entity, it's just like the birth of a newborn baby. It needs to be protected. So we should always be careful. Caring for others means caring for their faith. That's what we should be caring for. And caring for their faith means we should be careful not to destroy it by petty, it's called one-upmanship. I don't know if it is an expression in English, when you're always trying to be one up over somebody else. Anyways, by petty competition, let's put it that way. Okay. Another. I've already been speaking for 45 minutes and answered just a couple of questions. Does anybody have any relevant question? I say relevant because I want to make sure it's connected to what I've discussed so far, and not something that you just pull out of thin air and completely distracts from what I've been speaking about so far. So I'll give you an opportunity to ask a relevant question, and if there are no relevant questions, I'll take another question from the list of questions. Nobody's raising their hand?
Maharaj, can you hear me?
Yes.
Maharaj, we decided not to take questions from the people, just, like that, to avoid distraction as we faced last time. But we have some questions. If you have something to speak on, you may just continue. Otherwise, we can give you questions we already...
The only thing I have to speak on is these questions. There's more of them. You tell me what you would like me to do.
I would express my personal opinion. I'm very glad to hear what you're speaking, and if you can continue, I'll be just enjoying.
Okay. All right.
We don't want anybody to distract this, flow.
Okay. Question is, could you please elaborate on the nature of control by love? When I looked at this question, I thought of a perfect answer from Srila Prabhupada. And I'll let Prabhupada answer this question, because it's relevant and it's a good way to approach it. It's from the letter that I've always quoted, December 22nd, 1972. The letter is addressed to his disciple Karandar, and he speaks about how to, basically he speaks about a lot of details about how to preach to devotees. And he specifically says how to not kill the enthusiastic service which is voluntary. Which is, I think it's also a sign of love, that we don't want to kill voluntary service. So Prabhupada said, the point is to be engaged in doing something for Krishna. Never mind what is that job. But being so engaged in doing something very much satisfying to the devotee that he remains always enthusiastic. He will automatically follow the regulative principles because they are part of his occupational duty. By applying them practically as his occupational duty, he realizes the happy result of regulative principles. So the future of this Krishna consciousness movement is very bright, so long the managers remain vigilant that 16 rounds are being chanted by everyone without fail, that they are all rising before 4 morning, attending Mangal Arti. Our leaders shall be careful not to kill the spirit of enthusiastic service, which is individual and spontaneous and voluntary. They should try always to generate some atmosphere of fresh challenge to the devotees so that they will agree enthusiastically to rise and meet it. That is the art of management, to draw out spontaneous, loving spirit of sacrificing some energy for Krishna. That's Prabhupada's words. I could expand on it minimally. Essentially, how to control by love, not how to control. Could you please elaborate on the nature of control by love? In other words, how does it manifest in ourselves to be controlled by love? And essentially, priti, or love, affection, has to be there amongst devotees. It's not artificial. It's not something that we can say, you have to love. What does that mean? You have to love. It's like the example Prabhupada would use about putting a gun to somebody's head and saying, love me. Is that love? It's not love. Love is voluntary. And that's what Prabhupada is talking about. He wants to keep that spirit of voluntary service. Yes, but it goes both ways. Voluntarily, I'm submitting myself to authority. It's voluntary. We do that when we come to Krishna consciousness. We have that choice. We don't have to. And Prabhupada, even elsewhere in this letter, he says, we should not be so quick and so eager to count the numbers of our new devotees. Specifically says that. We should not be so eager and quick to count the numbers. He said, let them come, let them hear, let them see for themselves by example, and when the time is right, they will come forward. So what do they come forward for when the time is right? They come forward to voluntarily accept, I want to submit myself to authority. So it's voluntary on their part. And then the authority, as Prabhupada is saying, priti, a loving relationship, is also to how to keep that voluntary spirit alive. Because bhakti is voluntary. And we should be careful, as Prabhupada said, not to kill the voluntary spirit. That is Prabhupada's words. 1972, he wasn't speaking to Majjhima Bhaktas, Uttama Bhaktas. He was speaking to his leaders who Krishna sent to him at a particular time and place. He was helping them, teaching them, inspiring them, yet it was a request he made. Please, they've come with a voluntary spirit to serve. Please, try to keep that voluntary spirit alive. That's a task. One of the questions that was asked is how to become the qualified leaders that Srila Prabhupada expects us to become. How to become the qualified leaders Srila Prabhupada expected us to become? At least we should know what Prabhupada expected of his leaders. At least we should know it. We may not be able to become fully qualified, but at least if we keep it above our heads as something to aspire for, then we have a reason to do our service. If we don't know what we should aspire for, then we may become covered and forget who we're serving, why we're serving, and so many other necessities which are required to be a good servant. It happens. Evidence is there. It happens. So we should at least know what Prabhupada instructed his followers to become, his leaders to become. And they were not highly advanced individuals. They had one qualification. And Prabhupada oftentimes pointed that out to others. What was their qualification? They had faith in Prabhupada. That was their qualification. They had faith. That's all Prabhupada reciprocated that. He would never exploit it. He would always inspire it. Just like as I was reading, a nice example, I was just reading in Giriraj Maharaj's book. Wonderful example. Prabhupada was inspecting one of the smaller buildings that the devotees had acquired before Juhu Temple was actually even built. It was a smaller building that had been vacated, and the devotees had tried to fix it up in a way that others could live there. Prabhupada decided he wanted to go in to inspect. So he walked into the building, he looked around, and then he went into one devotee's room. The room was a little messy. Prabhupada commented about the mess. He noticed there was a light bulb that wasn't working properly. Prabhupada pointed out, should replace the light bulb. Then Prabhupada was about to go upstairs to the top floor. And the top floor was just an attic. Not really a suitable place to live. And some devotees had put Prabhupada's books in storage in the attic. And they obviously had been there for some time. And Prabhupada looked down and saw the books. And the books were all being eaten by worms. Prabhupada was, the word that Giriraj Maharaj used was livid. Do you know what livid means? Livid means he was visibly angry. Really angry. Turned around. His lips were trembling. Who was responsible for this? And then he walked downstairs, and the devotees could see that Prabhupada was really upset. Prabhupada then was walking towards the temple, and he saw the cornerstone that he had laid for the new temple 2 years previously. And the cornerstone was broken in half. Prabhupada displayed his anger again. How has this happened? Who is responsible? He was very angry, visibly angry. Continued to walk. And he went back to where he was staying at the time. And the devotees were all trembling and afraid, to come even close to Prabhupada. Prabhupada had went to the roof of the building where he was staying, and he was sitting with devotees. And some devotees were there, some neighbors were there, some guests were there. Prabhupada was smiling, laughing. He was completely devotees, they came up, they were initially they were afraid to go to see him. But when they saw him in this setting, they could see that Prabhupada was chastising them. And all the devotees who went there, their immediate reaction was, because he loved them. He loved them. And he could see that he wasn't affected by that anger. He wasn't controlled by that anger. He was teaching them. And all the devotees, when they saw that Prabhupada could immediately leave that scene, step into the next scene, and they were afraid to go up and see how happy he was, and laughing he was, and kind he was, caring he was, and exchanging with the devotees, even those devotees who he had just chastised. Their love just expanded. He knew how to show love and affection. Sometimes it means you have to chastise. But pretty, not out of hatred, not out of anger, pretty, out of affection. If we can't find that affection in our hearts, we should be very careful how we train, instruct, chastise, and teach others. This kind of loving relationship is something to build on. It's something that will, if properly exemplified, it will keep the devotees bound together in a spirit of voluntary service to Guru and Krishna. Best way to bind is with love. And even though we may not fully have it, even though we may not be it may be something that's beyond our comprehension to see it, to recognize it, to see it in our own hearts. But we should look wherever it is and try to teach it by our example. And in this way, be careful to not kill the voluntary spirit of service which people are coming forward and want to build on in the association of those they've come to voluntarily submit themselves to. This is how bhakti evolves. I would say this is, I believe, in a way to understand care not control in very simple terms. It's not complicated. It's very simple. And if we hear about it, just like I can't tell you how I'm drinking these stories of Prabhupada. Just hearing about Prabhupada's dealings. It's just like a continuous flow of nectar. It exists. It exists. We should not think it doesn't exist. It exists, and Prabhupada came to give it. He wants us to experience it. He wants others to experience it. He wants us to share it. So at least we should have faith that it exists, and we should cultivate the desire to someday have it, and even if we don't, we should try. Just try. Krishna's in our heart. He knows we're trying. He knows we're seeing what the ideal example is. He'll help us. We just need to be reminded from time to time that this is why we joined the Krishna consciousness movement. It's easy to forget. It's very easy to forget if we're not careful. But I'm sure everybody joined for the nectar of loving relationships. That's my answer to that question. That's my end to this session. I'm not going to continue. It's late for me. I'm going to try to stay within 1 hour, and it's been already a little more than 1 hour. And I hope I've answered some of your questions. And if I've said anything which is relevant, it's only because it's Prabhupada's mercy. Because he's the ideal teacher, and somehow, some way, just by seeing his ideal example, can instill in anyone's heart. Not only seeing, just hearing about it. Just hearing about it can instill in anyone's heart to become more qualified in our efforts to give Krishna to others. That's what devotee care is all about. I will end here. I thank you for this opportunity to share these few words with all of you. We will end here. And I don't know when it will happen again. I will leave that up to you. Or leave it up to whoever wants to invite me. And I also have to leave it up to my own schedule. It's not always so easy because I do have a schedule that's not always so flexible. And that's another reason why I wish to end here. Anything else that I've missed, Achyuta Priya?
Maharaj, thank you so much. It was wonderful. It was very enlivening and enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Achyuta Priya, for helping me teach this to others. May Prabhupada bless you. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Maharaj, if you're leaving, we may spend few minutes.
Okay, I
If
will.
you-
I will leave it with Varshana as the host.
Yes, okay.
Okay, and then.
Thank-
Oh no! Wait a minute. No,
thank you
you're
so
the
much.
you're the host. You have the ability to keep it going.
Okay.
Okay, and
Thank
then
you, Maharaj.
when you're finished, all you have to do is end. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Maharaj. It was very, very, very sweet.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Up to the point. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.